Hello, this is Dunedien, and I would like to talk to you guys today about how our view of the main characters in our media shapes the way that we view the characters around them. And to do this, I'm going to use an example from Captain America, the First Avenger, and I'm going to use an example of how we view Steve as this heroic, brave character within the movie, and tend to take what he says and his perspective as, what actually happens in all cases, as the right perspective, and how that shapes our view of one of the other characters that doesn't have very many lines, not much screen time at all, but in fandom, I've seen whenever this character is brought up, not very positive reactions to her. So, who am I talking about? I'm talking about the date that Steve Rogers, Pre-Serum, has at the county fair that they go to, at the World Fair. So when we first see this girl, she and her friend are meeting Steve and Bucky. And Steve, Pre-Serum, very scrawny, is not too excited about this date. And because I love Pre-Serum Steve Rogers as much as the next person. He's an awesome character. He doesn't really care about whether he's going to get hurt. If he thinks something's right, he's going to stand up for it. If he thinks somebody's doing something that's not right, he's going to say something. But he is not the most socially suave or socially knowledgeable about women or interacting with women, and he freely admits this. When he's sitting in the car with Peggy, he talks about how he hasn't had much experience with women. And our view of this female character that he goes on a date with is shaped by that conversation, right? So looking back, we see them go on a date, but we don't spend very much time on it, so we don't pay much attention to the woman. But then when he's talking to Peggy, Steve talks about how he hasn't had much luck with women. Women don't tend to want to date someone that they can step on. And so we form this view of women sort of being shallow and rejecting Steve Rogers. And while there might be some aspect of this that is correct, he is certainly scrawny, that's the reason, and he does have a lot of health problems, that's the reason that he's not, being accepted over and over and over again. That's not the whole story. And what prompted this to be used as my example is I saw a Tumblr post going around that was talking about how women and a lot of people in the fandom dislike this woman and think that she is clearly a negative character or a bad character because of her rejection of Steve Rogers, her shallow rejection of Steve Rogers. But if you actually go back and you look at their date. One of the things that the post says is that, it's not right that she abandoned him, that she, just sort of, flaked on the date. But that's not what happened. If you go back and view the actual date, there are 3 scenes that are shown. One where the 2 girls are standing together, and they meet up. So whoever this woman on the date is, she is not there for Steve Rogers, obviously. She's not met him. She is there because her friend asked her to go on a double date with Bucky. Her friend wants to date Bucky, so sure. She's going to go on the double date. Maybe it'll be fun. It's the World Fair, so they're going to have a good time with that anyway. And she meets up with Steve Rogers. And that's the first scene that you see. The next scene that you see, it's Bucky's date, and then Steve's date, all standing together, getting excited and looking at something. And then Steve, far, far in the background. Okay, so what does that tell us? That tells us that he is not interacting with his date. He is not showing an interest in this woman. He is not doing anything to encourage a relationship with her, to encourage, discussion, to encourage wanting to spend time with him. He's just sort of standing there away from the rest of the group in the background. Now, if I was on a double date with someone and the guy that was on the double date and was supposed to be dating me, was not hanging out with the rest of the group, his friend is there, so I'm assuming he's wanting to spend time with his friend. My friend is there, and I'm wanting to spend time with my friend. So I'm assuming that the reason that he's hanging back is probably because he doesn't really want to interact with me, since, there is sort of that obligation to interact with your date on a double date. So my assumption would be he's not interested, and that's fine, but, I am going to be a little bit upset if I'm stuck being the third wheel, because the guy that's supposed to be, meeting me on this date isn't hanging out with me. So you can kind of see why women, might not be interested in Steve, not because of shallow reasons, but because Steve, not that he's a bad person, but just doesn't know how to interact with women. He's socially awkward. That's something that he is. And even when he, transforms into, Chris Evans in super tip-top shape, he's still awkward around women. And the reason that he gets closer to Peggy isn't because he stops being awkward. It's because he actually has time to work through that awkwardness. So you get to see interactions with him and a woman that he's been able to work through the awkwardness with, and that he's gotten to know beyond just, this is a woman that I'm supposed to be spending time with. So, our view of Steve and Peggy's relationship and our view of Steve Rogers as this great person, this great character, which he is negatively shaping our view of this unnamed character that has only got a little bit of screen time, and making us make assumptions about her. And then, let's move on to the next scene. So the next scene, we see them together. Steve Rogers is, again, standing behind the rest of the group. So there's the three people in front watching Howard Stark, and then there's Steve Rogers behind them. And Steve Rogers sort of sticks his hand forward to offer her food, that's nice. But if she doesn't like whatever he's eating, then, she would probably have that, no thank you, if she's angry at him because she feels like she's been ignored this entire date, yeah, she might be a little bit like, no thank you, what are you doing? If she's engaged in the show and doesn't like being distracted, she may be like, no thank you, I don't know what you're doing. So there are tons of reasons for her, and she doesn't say anything negative to him. She doesn't say, oh, you're a loser, or why are you doing that? She just gives him a look like, no. So, we don't know what her motivations are. We don't know why she did that. But again, the way that he offered the food was awkward. The way that he's standing with them, he's not interacting with her. He's separating himself from her. And then you get to the final scene with the two of them, where you have Bucky and Steve talking, and he's going to go to the recruitment center, and the two women are sitting there waving, going, let's go dancing. Let's go have some fun. It's still both of them. And Bucky's like, all right, let's go, girls. He's not. And they go off with them. So, again, it's not Steve being ditched by his date like the post in question says. He's ditching his date. to go try to join the draft again when he knows he's probably going to be rejected. And yet we have this negative perception of this female character as just really shallow, and how dare she ditch him, and she treats him horribly based on turning down food, and that's it. And that's because we like Steve Rogers. That's because Steve Rogers overall is a positive character, and we don't like to think about him as this, character that is not the heartthrob that a lot of, I think, fandom likes to think of him as. Is not that is not that great of a date, is not, being this great, perfect, heroic person all the time, that he is portrayed as Captain America, the hero. But the reality is, women probably weren't interacting with him because he didn't know how to interact with them, and he was being awkward. And he inadvertently was sending signals that he was not interested, and he didn't want to interact with you, and he didn't like you. And I say this as someone who had to learn this myself, right? So when I was in college, I would go to parties with my friend who, she's a social butterfly. I'm much more of an introvert. But I would go to parties to spend time with her because there was a point in time where she was super, super busy, and she didn't have a lot of time, and she was trying to go and make new friends. So I was like, sure, I'll go with you. That way you have someone there we can hang out. If you want to go off and meet other people, fine, and I'll just, I can go socialize too. So I would go to these parties, and I would just be like this, like a little wallflower, but not a wallflower as in, oh, I'm this, shy, quiet person on the side, more a wallflower, like closed off, nobody talked to me. That's what it looked like from the outside. Now, I didn't see myself that way until someone pointed it out to me. I was like, oh, I never meet anybody at those, at those kinds of things. Maybe, maybe I don't know what's going on. People just don't like me. And my friends give this big, don't talk to me. I don't want to, I don't want to be here vibe. And because I'm awkward, and because I was sort of overwhelmed at parties with all of the people, when people did come up to talk to me, a lot of times I was very short in my answers, not because I didn't want to talk to them or because I wanted to be rude, but just because I was awkward and overwhelmed. And so as someone that has gone through that experience, I can see that that's how Steve is in this scene, and I relate to it. But at the same time, that is on Steve. That is on this character that we love. That is an aspect of him. That is a less positive aspect of his character. He's awkward, and he doesn't socially engage with women in the best way. And you can see this in the future clips too. He can deal with Natasha and interact with Natasha because, again, he's worked with her. He's comfortable with her. He's not had to interact with her as a woman. He's had to interact with her as an agent, as a coworker. So there's a different relationship there. But when he is talking to Natasha and she's throwing out people, he's like, I don't want to meet them. Now we could talk about the multiple reasons that might be, and maybe I'll do another video on, what the implications of that could be. But one of them could be that he's just awkward with women, and that isn't a priority for him. So he doesn't want to have to deal with working through that and meeting women and being in these awkward situations. That's a perfectly valid reason for that. And also when he's talking to Shannon, he's very respectful of her, and we could also have a video on their interactions, but he's a little bit awkward, even though she's theoretically been a neighbor with him for a while, at least, at the stage of the movie that we're watching. And has given indications that, she is available to talk to and interact with. So just think about that as you're watching movies, and especially as you're talking about characters, especially side characters, and as you're basing your view of them off of what the main characters are telling you, and what's going on with the main character. Keep in mind that main characters have flaws too, and main characters can have a way that they view themselves, as nobody wants to step on, no one wants to date a guy they can step on, that while they might be related to reality, are not the whole story, are not a accurate, full representation of why they're having a specific problem. Characters can be flawed, and that's part of what makes them relatable, and that's part of what makes them interesting. Yes, that's it. Like, subscribe. Again, let me know what you think. Let me know what your favorite characters are, and what your least favorite characters are, and how your views of them have been shaped by your understanding of other characters. Anyway, thank you. Have a great day.